Well, good morning. It's May and it's sunny here and I can see the blossoms on the trees. So it feels like spring is in the air and that's really, it's good for my soul inside and out. And I hope wherever you are, you're noticing something because I don't know, can't assume spring is everywhere, right? Around the world, it's different
No,
seasons.
could be
Yeah.
fall, it could be fall.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyways, I just want to give a warm welcome to everybody this Monday.
Yes, happy Monday.
And Melinda and I and Christine were talking about Mother's Day, and we want to wish you all, everyone is a mother, right? We all give birth and we all care for and nurture.
Oh, that's a great theme for today, giving birth. Yeah.
Giving birth and nurturing. So I'm wishing all of you, including, of course, the male mothers among us, happy Mother's Day week and happy Mother's Day year. And I'm very, very pleased to have Charles with us. And Charles has contributed so much to this project. And I particularly appreciate the combination in Charles of a big view of the society, the world, and also the experiential and really caring about the dialogue and caring about what each person thinks and feels and how each person relates. That's a wonderful combination and just exactly the combination of things that we need here in our helpers group, where we so value the diversity and each person's contribution, and also really emphasize the conversation and the group as a microcosm of our society and the internationalness of that. So welcome, Charles. I'm eager to hear what you present for us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. Let's get started. I'm going to share a screen with a quote. And this quote, I have not given the author, and some of you may realize who it is and some may not, but I want to read it as a starting point, and I will be developing how this, in my mind, crosses with the Jean's philosophy of the implicit. When the narrow bourgeois form has been peeled away, what is wealth, if not the universality of needs, capacities, enjoyments, productive powers of individuals, produced in universal exchange? What, if not the full development of human control over the forces of nature, those of his own nature, as well as those of so-called nature? What, if not the absolute elaboration of his creative dispositions, without any preconditions other than antecedent historical evolution, which makes the totality of this evolution, that is, the evolution of all human powers as such, unmeasured by any previously established yardstick, an end in itself? What is this, if not a situation where man does not reproduce himself in any determined form, but produces his totality, where he does not seek to remain something formed by the past, but is in the absolute movement of becoming? So some of you may have guessed who the author is. And some of you may not. But the author was Karl Marx. And I want to next bring in a quote from Jean. Well, I just want to say that when I read this passage to Jean Genlin, he just nodded. He didn't say anything other than nod. So it was just a simple assent. Now let me proceed. Do I stop sharing and then I go to another sharing? Is that how I do this? I wanted to share a quote from Jean now.
You're good. You could just put it back up.
Okay. So this was actually from the class we had with Donata on Jean and mysticism. He wrote, in revolutions, idealistic people have often subordinated their wills to leaders who promise to bring about a society in which people no longer have to subordinate their wills to others. But the stated ideals did not determine the outcome. What did? Always the movement's own hierarchical mode of organization. Now, I want to interject here that, well, let me interject it here, that I've been very interested in how we transform power over, which would be people subordinating themselves to the wills of an organization, and power with collaborative power. And so Jean goes on, he says, so essentially, even if our stated goal is to create a classless society where nobody's exploited, if the means that we choose are hierarchical and are based on power over, the outcome is not going to be a society where we are collaborating as free individuals. So Jean goes on, this mode soon makes leaders of those who operate it with the most skill and the fewest cares for anything else. I had conversations with her and he said, well, people who get power are the people who love power, and then the rest of us end up being sort of subordinated to them. How do we deal with that? He says, we don't have an answer to this problem yet, but the hopeful direction is to concern ourselves with how human beings could organize with, rather than by suppressing, the inwardly arising development of more than just a few individuals. I want to repeat that last sentence, the inwardly arising development of more than just a few individuals. So we see here this link, to me in any case, between Marx, who talks about an absolute movement of becoming, and Jean, who's talking about a way of working toward a new society, which is based on working with the emerging, the development of each person. And Marx also talked about the future society as one in which the free development of each individual, each one of us, was the condition for the free development of everyone. We need the free development of every single person, of each individual. It's necessary for everyone to be free. There's no such thing as freedom for everybody that's separate from the freedom of each and the development of each one of us. I think that is something that also Jean would certainly have agreed with. And plus this emphasis on the individual's development. Now, I want to say that this concept of development, of emerging, of becoming, is something that we are doing right here in this moment on this call. So that in a sense, as we're together, there is this opportunity as we create a space, and I think of it more as, sometimes people think of revolution as well, you take it over, you get a group of people but I think of it more as creating a space and a dialogue where people can find themselves, find their voices, and develop together how they want to relate to each other and how we want to conduct ourselves in a society, because that no person can live outside of society. We're just not. Even Thoreau had to go back and, get together with Emerson or his mother or whatever. So, so then we come to something that another thinker that I think is very important that Lynn has brought my attention to, which is Gadamer. And he placed a lot of emphasis on dialogue. And this relates closely to an idea of genes that there's a possibility that we haven't fully developed, in which the way we are with each other is we relate. Relating is a mutual process of connecting and being with each other in such a way that we cross who we are and allow something new to emerge. So that new is what I'm calling the new society. It's not some abstract thing in the future. It's something that we're actually doing and can be doing right here today, this morning. So I would say the future society is emerging every time we engage in authentic dialogue. I want to repeat that. The future society is emerging every time we are engaged in authentic dialogue. And the other thing is that if you talk about gene and focusing, we don't actually, can't actually know what the new society is. We only know the tiny steps that we can take together towards something new, towards something different, toward a new ways of relating with each other. Okay, let me just take a moment. I wonder if maybe we could just open it up for a little bit of dialogue. If there's anyone who has any thoughts, any disagreements, any questions.
Charles, I'm wondering if we need just a few breaths to.
Yeah, of course.
Quotes was so rich and complex, and what you said about them. So maybe we just need to take a few breaths and give ourselves. I think one of the things that focusing gives us is that revolutionary pause where we have everybody involved in the dialogue.
And just like with one comment about the quote from Marx, he's really talking about a whole new concept of wealth. It's not a concept of wealth that's based on how much we've amassed, how much capital. It's a wealth of richness, of relating, of living, of developing our capacities. It's a wealth of life. John Ruskin said there's no wealth but life, and that's essentially the same idea. It's a very different concept of what wealth is. Or if people can just sense what comes up for you, what feelings come up as you contemplate this question about what possibility there is for us to create a world where we relate to each other in this listening, emergent way.
Okay, I'll jump in here. And this is really murky, but so Pat and I are trying to create this organization that's horizontal, where everybody can participate. But that's our intention, and just because we're doing it doesn't make it so. So that's what we struggle with, that people can feel like it's theirs too, and that they can offer something. So anyways, we're trying to create a new kind of organization.
Exactly.
A new kind of focusing organization, which doesn't exist.
Right.
But again, we're supposedly the directors, but we decided not to have one, to have two, to try to make even the playing field. But that's still not good enough.
Beautiful. I mean, that's a beautiful example concretely of trying to create this new way where it's not top down, or where people are just passive, where they're actually collaborating, right? And participating and feeling that like full participants. And how do you do that? It's so easy if you're an authority to say, no, let's just do it this way. And of course, it takes more time to listen and to allow people to hold a space, right? As the organizers, rather than saying we have to direct things, we're actually holding a space for things to emerge.
And it's really interesting when you're dealing with international people from around, people from around the world, and holding their space, so that it's a lot of different cultures being represented. And so, yeah, things do move slower. And we also try, like, even when people write things, to have it in their own way of saying it, and not making it not having it always be perfect and pretty.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Right. Yeah, I think imperfection is progress comes from imperfection, not from perfection. Yeah.
I think that's such a struggle, this whole idea of how do we deal with this whole need that, like, we have, or I personally have, of wanting an authority, wanting a leader, and at the same time wanting to be a full participant on a mutual playing field. I just find, personally, I find those needs click with each other. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
You're pointing to an interesting thing, that sometimes we want somebody will take a leadership role, or even authoritative role. Eric Fromm wrote a book called Escape from Freedom, which was about why people follow dictatorial leaders. And part of it's easier and maybe more secure sometimes to be able to have a leader that has the answers. So the opposition to freedom doesn't always come from dictators. Sometimes the people themselves run away from exercising their freedom. It's in the Bible where Moses goes up to the mountain and comes back and sees the Hebrews worshiping the golden calf, because they couldn't stand the uncertainty of being free in the desert. So they had to form an idol that they could worship.
What comes up to me in relation to what you said, Dorothy, is Kohut's, the founder of self-psychology, is talking about the basic need for idealization as a relational basis for well-being. So we need to be understood, we need to feel like other people, but we also need this idealization. And we need to have people that we look up to, that we surrender to, that we feel are going to take care of us. And that's such a universal need. And it's so complicated, because the leaders, the mothers, if you will, going back to Mother's Day, the mothers need to know that the idealization isn't really of them as people, it's of the bigger them, and to sort of give it back to the others, to say, oh yes, you want me to be everything, of course. And what would that everything be? Jean would say, what would that, there's this giving back the authority to the others who are surrendering it to their larger selves. But it's I think we have to acknowledge that we all have that need for idealization.
Yeah, it's interesting. We go back to that quote from Jean. He starts by saying, idealistic people have often subordinated their wills to leaders who promise to bring about a society. So he's pointing out that people themselves have subordinated their wills to leaders. that speaks to that, right? That they've had to idealize leaders that promised to create a society where people wouldn't subordinate their development.
I do think that there's a difference between subordinating your will
Mm-hmm.
and surrendering your will, because the subordinating is a kind of putting yourself down, letting surrender is when you're trusting the other, and yet you're trusting them with something much larger, and you're having more of yourself in the surrender than less of yourself. It's just a whole different feeling, but yet they're very close.
Yeah, surrender can be a good thing, right? It can be a way that we give ourselves over to something.
Mm-hmm.
Jean even talked about surrendering to the felt sense.
Absolutely.
That we don't really control the felt sense. We allow it to take us over, and we listen to it. We don't lose ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We still are here, but we allow the felt sense to take us over in a way. So that's a kind of surrender too, right? So it's interesting because as I'm listening to this, I'm in a process of changing as this dialogue is changing me. And I want to ask, so perhaps we need, and future society is an abstraction, right? So I'd almost like to get rid of it. How about if we say the emergent possibility of new ways of and more fulfilling ways of relating, and finding ways and forms that permit that to happen. And that might include a place, but certainly would include a place for, Eric Fromm talked about rational authority as opposed to irrational authority. Now, if you go to a music teacher to get lessons in playing the piano, you let the teacher guide you, because the teacher knows something about playing the piano. Eventually, you learn to play the piano and you no longer have to rely on the teacher. Irrational authority doesn't allow the person to become a master. It maintains the person in a subordinate role, an exploitative role. So maybe this healthy idealization would further people's growth and development, as opposed to kind of an unhealthy, exploitative type of authority. That would be one possibility. Welcome other people's thoughts on this.
Yeah, let's be the thing that Charles is helping us to focus on. Let's be that. And one of the things I think about the surrender is surrendering to something that's coming up in you, and you think it might be a stupid thing to say or whatever, and the surrendering to the emergent leadership in yourself is to say it, right? To offer it.
Right.
Even though it may be a stupid thing to say.
The only, what I say, I remember Malcolm X saying, the only stupid question is the one that hasn't been asked.
Charles, would you say again that bit about making mistakes and my big thing is, being brought up by a regimental sergeant major that was 6'4". I followed the rules. It's making mistakes is not something that I know it's a way forward, but boy, it's hard for me to do that.
I
So
would
limit
imagine it
myself.
was terrifying to make a mistake.
Of course, there were consequences.
Right. Well, I'm tempted to say that's not how I envision this wonderful new future society. But that's right. So how do we carry that with us, right? We carry that past with us. It's here. Marx talks about not being formed by the past, right? By not having a previously established yardstick, that we develop ourselves as a totality of all our powers and potentialities into a place of what he calls absolute movement of becoming. But if we are still, in another passage, Marx talks about the past weighing like a nightmare on the brain of the living. You know, how do we, so that's the way, that's the whole question. And actually, I wanted to bring this up. The whole question, comes from Jean, the whole question of time. And there's clock time, but there's also the sense of time that's here. The past is here, the future is here, and it's all here in this present. And it's a very different sense of time that doesn't contradict eternity. You know, it's sort of now. But I don't know if I'm answering your question. I think that it's part of what I was saying. Create a safe space. You know, where mistakes are opportunities.
That's the thing that gave me a little frisson of hope when you said that. You know, it's got to, opportunities come from the mistakes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfection is stifling.
Mm.
I mean, it doesn't allow any room for experimenting. Or there's a wonderful, what is it that by Jean talks about? Improvisation will provide.
Okay.
You know, where he talks about how we just improvise, we try this, we try that, and eventually we find something that works.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm being, oh, sorry. I'm being reminded of this chapter 12 in focusing in the main book.
Yes.
About being new pattern creators of new patterns.
New patterns, yes, that was, yes.
And here, what I feel and what I've been experiencing is that we are living that, we are experiencing that, we are doing that in these groups where somebody mentioned the international difference and the difference in culture. And here I'm in Argentina, my English is not my first language, and I feel that I have a voice here. And this is so very important because and we have this treasure. We can use the focusing way of listening to ourselves and finding this fresh thing. And even though it's not very clear, we can begin to speak out here in these groups and begin to find our new and fresh ideas and truths and ways of being in the world and ways of being with others. And what is so important with this group, for example, or these groups, is that here we are experiencing it, and in a way, and this is my experience, I feel I'm being empowered to speak out in other contexts with other people that might not have this way of sharing. And it's like what happens here can be translated to other contexts with other people and can help this new way of relating, of communicating, of finding each person's uniqueness and letting it be and letting it be out in the world. So I in my experience, what we're doing here is really, it's so powerful because it is multiplied in so many ways that we don't even know. And I'm seeing these faces here, and I feel, wow, if we are all here and being able to let our voices be heard, and it's like, wow, this is so
Oh,
wonderful.
that's so beautiful. That, yeah, I think it just says it so
Yeah.
beautifully. Did somebody want to say something? I want, there's in that, I don't know if it's in that chapter, but one of those chapters near the end of the book on focusing, Jean quotes somebody who came, I think, to one of their meetings that changes me, said, what is happening here has never happened before, something like that. And she means that this is a new formation. This is a new event. We're creating something new together in the way that we're meeting, in the way we're listening. So it wasn't just in the literal sense that every time something happens, it's never happened before. Or every sentence we speak has probably never been spoken before, or most sentences. But it's more than that, right? It's a way of being. I think that's actually Carl Rogers talked about empathy as a way of being. This is a way of being, and we're embodying it here and now. I think that you said it so well. This is a place where we nurture each other in a space like this, to be able to embody, to some degree at least, this quality in the way that we relate with others, even outside of these settings where it's very easy to relate this way because we all share this focusing culture.
Charles, this is Shashi. I came a bit late, so I missed the beginning of the things, and you're introducing you're introducing so many ideas. But what stirred me was redefining wealth. What is wealth?
Yes, I'm going to put that in the chat. I'll put that quote in the chat.
Quotes in the chat, yes.
Because that just brings you at a totally different platform, and is very freeing. It's very freeing from eons of ties that we have to the material things and stuff like that, you know. It's very freeing, and it offers so many opportunities to grow and move forward and enrich your life, I think, if you redefine what is wealth. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, this is the quote. It's a pretty, I think, a pretty amazing quote. It's from he wrote, before he wrote Capital, he wrote some just notes to himself. So it was really not published. It was just sort of his own process of thinking. So that's where he talks about how, when the narrow bourgeois form has been peeled away, what is wealth, if not the universality of needs? And I love the fact that Marx defines wealth as the wealth of needs, that we need other people, we need to express ourselves. There's a wealth of need. For him, the poverty is a wealth. It's kind of a strange shifting of what we, actually, I remember Marshall Rosenberg expressing that he would go to Africa and people would express their gratitude by bringing a fruit or something that's all they could afford. But for him, they were so much richer than some of the corporate leaders that he'd been working with, who didn't have this sense of abundance and gratitude, which was a different kind of wealth from the wealth that the billionaires had. I'm not saying some billionaires probably do have this sense of wealth that Marx is talking about. I don't mean to demonize or anything, but there's a difference between having billions of dollars and being wealthy in this rich human sense of human need. Need to be alive, need to express ourselves, need to live. Jean used to say, life wants to live, and that's a kind of need. And that's also a kind of wealth. That's the quote. That's the quote from Marx, and I'll put the quote up from Jean, which has to do with how can we align ourselves with the emergent potentialities of people rather than suppressing it and making it fit into an organization.
Yeah, and this is Sophie. And when we do align ourselves to that, and then the potential that's there has room to move forward, right? To unfold, to just by the presence and by the presence that we offer, that we can offer.
The presence that we can offer, that's a wonderful, and it relates to holding the space, right?
Yeah, right. Holding the space for the potential.
Yes, holding the space for the potential.
Mm-hmm. That is in each of us. The other thing that I'm struck with, or that I come back to, is to have, I can't remember the words that you were using, but human society or something like that. Losing my train of thought. To I don't know how to say this. It's gonna come.
Take your time. Take your time. No, take your time.
Thank you. Yes, if at the core of what we try to make happen, if it's there at the core in the way we walk it, in the way we do it, then there's more chance that it would happen, right?
Exactly. It's in the way we do it, not so much what we do.
Right. Yeah. And there's something about integrity there, right? If in the way we do it, we are in alignment with what we are naming, voicing, there is integrity with what we want and how we voice it and how we try to make it happen. Yeah. That's where the work is, right?
I'm sorry, I was a little distracted trying to keep up with the chat. Where's the work?
The work of having integrity with what we are voicing, walking the talk, right?
Yeah. I this maybe bring in, let's see how we're doing on time. Are we going to just about 9 o'clock? Let me just bring this concept in. I once said to Jean that I thought focusing was a de-alienating process. What did I mean? Marx talked about how we get alienated from ourselves, from a community with other people, from even the very work of our own hands. We work in a factory, and what we create is taken over and appropriated by the owner of the factory and sold. So we even lose control of our own product, of our own labor. So, but with focusing, we come back to ourselves, right? We pause, we sense our felt body sense, we connect to our body, and we end up having a more intimate relationship with ourselves, with our feelings, and we listen to others in a different way. We learn this way of listening, which is self-listening, which guides us to be able to listen also. So we get more deeply in touch with ourselves. And I'm sort of losing why. I know I was picking up on something you said, Sophie, but What was the last thing you said? Do you remember?
No.
No? Okay, that's okay. But I do think that that's a central aspect of focusing, is that it helps us to come back to ourselves and to the life forward, implying that we have in our living bodies. And that's actually what we want to nourish, and what ideally, in my mind, we would nourish in a quote unquote future society. But we don't do it abstractly like in the future. We're doing it now. That's the only way we can get there, is small steps.
And embodying it, doing it now, embodying it.
Yeah, and embodying it as we do it now. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm struck by Sophie, your use of the word integrity.
Oh, that was the word. That was what brought me to the idea of de-alienating. Yes, integrity.
Alienating. When you said it, Charles, I thought you said alienating, and I thought, wow, what?
No, de-alienating.
Alienating.
And so yes, it exactly. Focusing brings us to our integrity, because, or what Marx would say, our totality, right?
Right.
Our totality. But our totality is never something finished. It's in a movement of becoming.
Right. So the idea of integrity, of being one, I guess, with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep talking, Charles, about holding a space. And I'm just sort of taking in these words, and also in the context of what Nati said about how we're trying to be that and do that. And I wanted to say that Melinda and I have been talking about the future for Help for Helpers, because we've ended the second year really of this group. And how do we want it to be in the future? And so this conversation is so relevant to, well, is that up to Melinda and I? How do Melinda and I be the mothers in some kind of way, and yet give back the authority to the group? How can you be really part of the future of Help the Helpers? How do we nurture the leadership in every single person, even someone who comes for the first time has something absolutely necessary to contribute, even if they don't say anything? Their presence is making a huge difference in who we are and what we are, and how do we nurture the kind of leadership that each person has, all different kinds of leadership, right? Everybody helps us in different ways. And this is a good time for me to say that if you would want to be part of the conversation and maybe part of the decision making about the Help the Helpers, just put your name in the chat and say, I want to be part of a meeting about this and be part of this particular kind of leadership. I think what I'm assuming, and I don't know if others agree, is that leadership is all different kinds. So Melinda and I have taken on the kind of leadership where we're sort of organizing things and making a format. And everybody doesn't want to do that. Everybody doesn't have to do that, but some people want to do that, and anything you have to say is going to help do that. And there are all kinds of other ways, like Dorothy, just volunteering to beautifully select and read a poem every single week almost, right? Dorothy has made such an incredible contribution. And Christine doing all the tech work and sending out notices. And Um, and then the people who come all the time and have things to say and help to guide the discussion. So in a very real way, Charles, what you're bringing is really where we are at this
That's
crossroads.
perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Exactly. We're creating, it's part of what we're doing now, not some abstraction about what's going to be in 20 years from now. We don't have any idea what's going to be here in 20 years from now. But we're taking steps here toward forming something. Or as Jean mentions, new patterns, new forms, right now. And I even think, well, I remember we used to use the term leaderful group rather than a leaderless or lead, where basically everyone's exercising some form of leadership. And leadership might just be listening and maybe reflecting or something about the way that you're present here. I like people speaking up and contributing.
I wanna speak up.
Yes, please, Victor.
Hi. I just want to say that there is a person in the group, which is myself, who has always like an innate certain amount of disrespect to any leader in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to say.
Well, good for you. I can appreciate that.
I hear this word leadership, and I have an immediate reaction in me, like, fuck you. That's kind of sort of.
And now you're going to be annoyed at me by you saying this is how you're exercising your leadership.
Yeah, I was labeled once as an anti-leader. Somebody called me, you're like a born anti-leader. I wasn't born like that, but
was that supposed to be a bad thing?
No,
okay.
In a group dynamic, there is a like leader and anti-leader.
Yeah.
When the group develops, there is usually these two positions, and I would be the anti-leader.
I like that.
Not like often I would say. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think we need anti-leaders.
Absolutely.
So maybe, I don't know, it's actually gotten to be a little bit past 9. I know one person had to leave, but maybe we could have a little lead in for a breakout. And I want to sort of leave this open and for people to sort of have their own way of, I don't like to dictate what happens in the breakouts. I think that's time for you to work it out with, but we can have some suggested approach. Now, I want to say just something very briefly. I want to take a term from Ann Weiser Cornell and Barbara McGavin, where they talk about being in a tangle, and you somehow can't get out of the tangle. And in some ways, I feel sometimes socially, we feel like we're in a tangle. And how do we get out of it? And of course, they have a whole method of coming to what they call self and presence, and being with the different parts in such a way that eventually, coming back to Marx, you can have a totality, or your total self can emerge in a freer way. But I don't think we, in a sense, can know what the future outside the tangle really looks like until we're outside the tangle. It's a sort of, and yet, I'm going to say 2 things. We can't, there's a phrase that Jean used, looking up the answer in the back of the book, which was a way of sensing, well, how would it look if we were outside this tangle that we're in as a society? Can we allow that to be in our body? Can we allow ourselves to feel into the wanted feeling, the wanted, and that's what I want to invite everyone here to do, and to do it in this way, which is to sense, how would you like in your heart of hearts to relate to others in your life? Not how you were taught to judge people or whatever. How would you in your own heart of hearts want to be and relate. And take a minute or two to sense that. Maybe if you want, jot down a word or two, or just allow yourself to feel it. What would feel right for you? And could this way of relating could possibly be something that would characterize a quote unquote future society? What would it be like if people related in this way? If you were able to relate in this way, and you were supported in relating in that way? And I'm going to suggest that we break out into groups, and maybe you could carry that, use that as a starting point. Although again, feel free to do something else if that's what you feel like. And I'm also going to suggest a possible way to do this, and again, feel free not to do it, which is you take 5 minutes, one person takes 5 minutes and speaks. You switch to the other person, and the other person, who is the listener, takes in what the first person said and focuses from there. Crosses with, carries forward, whatever comes in them from listening to the first person. You do that for 5 minutes, and you go back to the first person, and they pick up the ball, allowing that to come in, taking it in, and carrying forward in their own way, and then back to so there's a back and forth. That would be 20 minutes with about 5 minutes going back and forth. I like that because I think it helps us to develop a crossing and an interacting other than just speaking, but do whatever feels right. I'm curious how this experiment went.
Yeah, me too. Welcome back, everybody, and we want to hear what you did in your breakout room.
I want to jump in. This is my favorite way of discussing or sharing when we just, resonate or feed from each other, or it's just so wonderful how it evolves, what comes. It's so rich. I love my conversation with Steph, and one of the many things, but one of the things that stays with me right now is the how the minority voice matters.
The minority voice matters.
And that the minority is in a certain context a minority, but in another one is not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a time also issue, but yeah. The other idea that I'd love to explore is, how, and I like that word that you brought in, Char, about leaderful group. Would that be like a school of fish or a flock of birds where nobody is leading? They all align. They don't bump into each other's space. They go somewhere. They are together. It's like they surrender perhaps to a larger force that's all in us and out there, so that there is no I leading or you leading. So yeah.
We're all following in a certain sense, something larger, right?
Yes, and that's a leadership too.
Yes, that's a leadership too.
Yes.
Very nice.
Yes, really.
Oh, one more thing. There's so much. I want to leave space for others, but you know, the safety. We were talking about safety and how Victor is saying, you know, fuck this, fuck leadership. That we can, you know, not only it's recorded on YouTube, right? Victor,
For the world to hear.
the world can hear it, but that, you know, him saying this shows that there is safety in here, and it's making me safe for more.
Safe for more. Yes, it's making it safe for more.
Right.
Hi. I don't know if anybody can hear me. Anyway.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Ah,
Well, thank you, Charles, for today's leadership. One of the things that came up for me, and I felt a connection with Victor right away in our larger group, because there's a place in me that rebels against authority and leadership as well. But I love the idea of finding security in an openness and vulnerability in change. And sometimes when life is shifting and I find a new open place, new sense of vulnerability, to also be able to find that safety and security. And sometimes that's not always easy to find. And that can, one of the things we talked about is the challenge and learning from that challenge.
So fuck authority, and grab a safe space for vulnerability.
Right. And finding that safety in the newness.
Oh, that's a wonderful next step, and finding that safety in the newness. Oh, wow. Yeah, I like that.
So that word grab is interesting, right? Grab that safety.
Grabbing the safety.
There is a choice there. And maybe that's where there's always some self-leadership or self-agency where we're making a
Self-agency. Even I like self-agency. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, it isn't that somebody else is giving you safety.
No, you're creating it. You're grabbing it. You're creating it. You're grabbing. Grabbing it is nice.
I like that.
Yeah.
And also that going to the edge where you can be comfortable with going outside your comfort zone, where you can go to the edge and not over the edge.
Right.
And going to the edge and not over the edge. Yeah. Going out of your comfort zone, but not to the point where you're so unsafe that you can't function. Yeah.
I want to go outside my comfort zone.
Oh, yay.
When we're talking about fucking authority, that's too much work. I want some leader to come along and fuck authority for me, so I don't have to do
it. Okay, that's a nice request.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, too much work. Okay, let somebody else do it. Fuck authority. Well, you got Victor. You got Victor here to do it.
Yeah, you know, it's a deep conversation about this, finding safety in change, in newness, and because I don't feel safe. I feel I may be excited, and I can get very excited for some time, but I always come back to the safety of non-change, of non-changing. And also just popped in my mind while I was listening that, you know, the moment I was still living back then in Russia, and this was still Soviet Union, and KGB started talking, wanted something from me in their very sly kind of fucked up way. And I remember this fear, when I realized that this was KGB, because they presented themselves first to somebody else. And this, because there was an organization that could do anything to you, basically. And this moment of fear and was prolonged because it seemed like never ending, because they wanted to talk again after some time, you know. And my sense that there was somehow my psyche found a way out of it. Finding some sort of safety in that very extremely unsafe situation. And then later I had a chance to speak with some very experienced dissenter, and I told him about these conversations, and he asked me, "Who trained you?" I said, "Nobody." You know, what do you mean? They had a system of training people to talk to when KGB talking, you know, and you know, somehow there was in me without the training. But this shaky ground is really, I feel like, a very important moment. Standing on it. Wow. And not giving in, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. That was very new. At that time.
Oh my God.
Maybe we're going to have to stop. Maybe we can all hold
and
that.
yeah, I just want to end. They're very deep-seated fuck the authorities.
Yeah.
You know, in that, and that shaky ground, standing on it.
That gives a sense of safety to be able to say that internally or even externally to fuck
It's
off.
a very special type of safety. I can't really describe it. It's not the safety of your home.
Yeah.
It's kind of, safety on the wind. In, you know, like safety during an earthquake. But
Well,
yes, there is certain groundedness there.
Groundedness, yeah.
Groundedness, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We do need to stop, right? And I guess there's
Dorothy's going to
read us our poem, right?
I just want to mark that place that you left us. That very special kind of groundedness or safety that includes the fuck you in it on, and that's where we came to. And I, Melinda and I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for next time for us to talk about, we were going to talk about windows to the world situation, but to talk about our world, this group, and want for it for the future, you know. So we'll be trying on the new society next week. Want everybody's contribution about how we want this group to be a living instance of
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Live in, and how we can go that way for next year. So Dorothy, we're ready for your poem.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you. I love the idea of you opening it to the whole group next week, sharing the future. I really love that we can all be included in thoughts about that, and we can be thinking about it. The poem, continuing with the poet, theologian from Northern Ireland. Now this is one of his poems by Padraig Ó Tuama, the Northern of Ireland. It is both dignity and a difficulty to live between these names, perceiving politics in the syntax of the state. And at the end of the day, the reality is that whether we change or whether we stay the same, these questions will remain. Who are we to be with one another?
Mm.
And how are we to be with one another? And what to do with all those memories of all those funerals? And what about those present whose past was blasted far beyond their future? I wake, you wake, she wakes, he wakes, they wake, we wake and take the troubled beauty forward.
Oh my God.
Oh.
So perfect.
Dorothy.
So perfect.
Wow, that's amazing.
So perfect.